Hey, which does better, dry washing or washing in a sluice box? Which is better? Well, generally speaking, I'd say, of course, wet, but there's sometimes that you really don't have water. Then you might want to do dry washing. I did a video a couple of weeks ago on dry washing, and I talked about that I would test my dry washer versus running it in a sluice. And so what I did is I ran all the dirt that I dug through the dry washer, and I got about 0.4 of a gram, which is really not a lot. You know, I've done experiments like this in the past, and now that experiment that I did like 4 or 5 years ago, I actually ran some really coarse plaster material through my dry washer and then tested it through the sluice, and I got like 97% recovery with the dry washer. But that gold was coarse, and there wasn't a lot of clay in it. And the more clay you have and the finer the gold, well, you know, you're not going to get as good a recovery. And in fact, in that test, when I did 97%, yeah, the 3% that I didn't get was really fine stuff. Well, the gold that I was going after the other week that I did my video on where I dry washed, in that video, the gold there is pretty much all fine. It's all like that 3% that I didn't catch in the dry washer in that other test. So now we're doing an experiment and testing to see whether, you know, what kind of percentage am I really getting when I'm doing fine gold and the material has a fair amount of clay in it. It was really dry, so that's good. That's another problem with dry washing. If the material is wet, yeah, that could be a problem. Now, hey, I am Chris Ralph, the professional prospector, and today we're doing this experiment to see which is best, or comparing dry washing and wet washing. Generally speaking, especially for fine gold, wet washing is a lot better. But I wanted to show you my homemade recirculating sluice. I got a 42-gallon tub from Home Depot, and I've got probably a little over 30 gallons in it, and I've got this set up to hold my sluice, and I've got it balanced. I checked the water flow, and I've run a little bit of material, and I'm going to run some material now, and I got some pictures of it, so let me explain and look at the pictures that I've taken of my sluice system so you can understand it a little bit better.
Here's a closer look at my homemade sluicing system, or recirculating sluice system. This is really just a Keen A52 sluice box that I bought. I hate to admit it, many years ago. This was actually purchased in the late 1970s. That tells you how long I've been doing this stuff. And anyway, I have made a few changes. The sluice box itself, it came with indoor-outdoor carpet, which I replaced with miner's moss. And then in those days, it didn't come with the little ribbed matting, that the indicator matting that you can use to see if you got any gold, a small gold anyway. I cut a piece of that and glued it in the front there, just below the Y section. And so anyway, those are the modifications I made to it. But other than that, it's still the same riffles, still the same expanded metal. And then, of course, I made, as you can see in red, a little water manifold that spreads out the water over the box and clamps onto the part of the sluice there. And, you know, that way, you know, I can pump water to it. I've got about 1,000 gallon per hour pump that runs off 12 volts. And, you know, it's submersible and inside the tub, and the water comes up through a tube and then goes into the manifold. Here's my little sluice setup from a little bit different angle. You can see in the front I have an adjustable thing that's with the poles there. But on the back, it's just sitting on a 2x4 over the tub so that it goes off the back and then dumps into the tub. Now up at the front, you can see maybe a little bit, I've got some metal bars. For whatever reason, it comes out of the manifold a little bit unevenly. And so I've got those bars up at the top to just kind of redirect the flow around so I get a more even flow across the sluice box. Here you can see the sluice box in operation. You can see the water flows pretty evenly over the sluice, over the riffles. And, I've got the dirt that I'm putting in next to the sluice box. You can see the orange handle there. It's got an orange scoop in it. And I have one bucket upside down and then the bucket with material in it on top of the bottom of the upside down bucket, and just to lift the material up and have it handy so it's easy to scoop and feed into the sluice box. One thing I will say about a recirculating sluice, you have to feed it in carefully, and there's no way that this could process material as fast as my dry washer. I mean, I certainly can process through the dry washer more material in a shorter time. In a sluice like this, you have to feed it in carefully. You don't want to just dump gobs of material in there. And so, it definitely runs slower than the dry washer, but it gets pretty decent recovery on fine gold, and it's a pretty simple setup. And, a lot of these like 2x4s and stuff are pieces I just had around the house. Those little support poles I've had for years. Anyway, just put together some stuff that I had together with my old-timey A52 sluice, which is, the A52 that they make now is still essentially the same as what I'm using. So I think it works pretty good. And with the miner's moss, I think that's a good modification to help better catch the small gold.
That said, let me go ahead and start running, and I'll start doing this material, and I think I'm probably going to do like a voiceover because the pump makes noise and there's noise and everything, and it'll allow me to talk while I'm doing this. So let's get to running some material. I've got a 12-volt battery back here. It's a lithium iron phosphate, and I've got a 1,000 gallon per hour pump. It's basically a pump for air conditioning for a swamp cooler. Anyway, let me talk over this while I'm actually doing the work.
So for this experiment, I've got 8 buckets that are about 3/4 full. I didn't fill them full all the way because they're heavy. So 8 3/4 full 5-gallon buckets equates to about 6 full 5-gallon buckets. That volume is about 30 gallons or about 4 cubic feet or about 300 pounds of material. Now, it's not a super huge sample, but 4 cubic feet is enough to get a good sample of this. And what I'm trying to do is to measure the difference between going in there and dry washing and going in there and running a sluice box system. Now, I told you I've done an experiment like this before with coarse gold and low clay in the material, and I got 97%. And that's 97% recovery is about the maximum, optimum kind of conditions that, what's the best you could get. And with this, I'm kind of measuring, what's the worst you could get? Because it's got real fine gold and a pretty fair amount of clay and that sort of thing. Now, for just comparing how much gold you get, you got to remember this is pretty slow. You can't just dump a bunch of the material in. You've got to give it time to go through the sluice box. And, when I was dry washing, I probably was going, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 times this fast, at least 3 or 4 times this fast. So obviously you can process a lot more material through a dry washer than you can in a sluice setup like this. Now, one of the things you got to take care of or keep an eye on is not muddying the water too much. You keep adding clay and silt and that kind of stuff to the water when you're processing this material, and it thickens the water up. And eventually, you get the water so muddy and so thick that you're going to lose recovery because the gold isn't going to have a chance to settle down into the sluice behind the riffles or into the miner's moss matting that I have underneath here. So you're going to get poor recovery. So you kind of have to limit yourself with the water because the water just gets muddier and muddier. Now, one of the things I do in order to do this is I will run, a certain amount of material through, maybe the equivalent of a 5-gallon bucket full, or even not even maybe that much, and then I will wait a while, turn the system off, wait a while, and allow the mud that's in the water to settle out, because it will. I mean, if you wait an hour or something like that, the vast majority of the mud will settle, and then once it's down, because of the way that I have the pump is actually in a small bucket at the bottom of the thing, so the sand and dirt is not going to get into the bucket. But once you allow the material to settle, it settles on the bottom, and the material coming to the pump comes from the top of the bucket, which is 6 or 8 inches off the bottom of the tub, and so you're getting better liquid. So that's a good thing about that, is letting it settle. One of the problems that you do have though is there's organics in all this material, and the organics float. All the little bits of root or little bits of plant matter, this and that and the other thing that's, organic material, and it floats. So, you can only deal with that somehow. I guess I could let it settle and then kind of reach in there with a screen and try and capture the material floating. But eventually you have to do something and protect your pump. Like I say, I got a bucket in there that keeps the material flowing along the bottom off the pump, and make sure that the pump takes its input from, like I say, maybe 8 inches off the bottom of the tub. So you're getting a decent result. The material at the back of the where the sluice is dumping into the tub, you get material pile up there, and the more it piles up, of course, the more it starts moving the other directions from the back end of the tub to the front end. But that's why I have that bucket there. Now, eventually, though, even letting it settle and taking your time to go through the thing, eventually you're going to have to clean up. And so I've got, like I say, the equivalent of 6 5-gallon buckets, and what I did was I went through the equivalent of 3 5-gallon buckets, basically halfway through the process, through the sample, and then went ahead and cleaned up and get the mud out and start over again with fresh water. So that explains the process of what I'm doing to wet wash this sample, and I'm not going to bother to show you a cleanup of the sluice box. It's just a pretty standard cleanup of the sluice box, and I guess we'll next move on to my going ahead to panning out the cons, because of course when you clean out the sluice box you get a set of cons, and then I will pan through it and clean up the gold, and I'll show you the panning through, and then I'll be drying the material and weighing up, and we'll have a discussion of what the results of this test is. And honestly, at this point when I'm working on it, I don't know what the results of the test are going to be. I'm sure I'm going to get more gold, but we will see from the results how much more I get. Okay, well, I've got that stuff all cleaned up, and I cleaned out the sluice, and I've put the material in buckets, and actually I have one of the buckets from the cleanup here in my pan, and I'm going to go through the material and get the gold out of it. Now, one of the things, because I know this is fine gold, right? One of the things I'm doing is to do a lot of shaking. Make sure the material is well stratified. Bigger nuggets have a tendency to sink down through the material as you shake it much faster than little tiny dust. And I know that a lot of this stuff is going to be, something like minus 30, maybe even minus 50 mesh.
So a lot of shaking, and then do my wash off, and more shaking and washing off. I have a good amount of material to go through, probably a couple pans like this. Won't have you guys watch me for the whole thing, but I do want to emphasize that I'm being real careful with this, not to lose a lot of gold. Being careful to shake it down. And wash off the light stuff. Now, to be honest, I'm expecting pretty good amounts of gold. I can already start to see a little bit of black sand. I just have to get down through this and see. So, like I say, not going to make you guys watch me pan through endless amounts of this stuff, but let me go ahead and work on this, and I'll bring it back when I've got the concentrates ready to start really cleaning them up. I want to show you that I've transferred to a smaller pan for ease of finishing up. I'm down to just about a handful of material, a lot of which is black sand, but not all. There's still some brown quartz sand left, and transferred to a different pan. And that's one thing you should consider when you're going through concentrates and you have a lot of concentrates and you pan down through it with a bigger pan like I was, that it's good to finish with a smaller pan. You just have better control. The material isn't as spread out, it can be concentrated more, and it's just easier to handle to finish. And in fact, these little pans are often called finishing pans. So I'm continuing on with this. Haven't yet gotten to where I have just black sand, and when I get down to just black sand, I'll have a magnet to help clean it up. But this is the next step in the process. Okay, for final steps, I'm down to pretty much all black sand. I've got my weak magnet and a strong magnet, and I'm going to use them together to get out the black sand without removing the gold. I've already seen here, we haven't got results yet, of course, because we haven't weighed it up, but I've already seen here that there's quite a bit of gold in here, and I expect that we're going to be getting more gold from the sluicing than we got from the dry washing, which isn't surprising because the fineness, the small size of the gold. But I'm going to go through now with a magnet and carefully remove as much of the black sand as I can, being real careful again not to pick up any gold, starting out with a weak magnet before I move to a stronger magnet. That just gives me a better shot at it. But again, I've done this on other videos. I do it with water. I shake the magnet, even the weak magnet. I hold it a little ways above. I'm trying to get the stronger, more magnetic part of the black sand out first before the weaker, less magnetic part of the black sand. I'll get that out with the stronger magnet. But first we go with the weak magnet. And we shake it to make sure that if there's any gold that the thing picks up, that the gold gets dropped. And I'm also using another pan. I'm panning into a pan, just a safety pan, so that if I do lose any gold over the side, well, I can pick it back up in the main pan. So that's where I'm at now. That's the step I'm going through, and we'll bring it back when I've got pretty much clean gold, and then we'll weigh it, and then we'll discuss our findings from our dry washing versus wet washing experiment.
Okay, so here's the gold I ended up with in this little pan that I was using. And you can see I got a nice bit of gold there. And the little brown pieces are mostly gold. They're basically what was pyrite that had gold in it, and the pyrite's kind of gone away or oxidized, and you're left with these little bits of gold that have brown staining and maybe a little bit of attached limonite or some other iron oxide attached to them. Anyway, I'm going to weigh this up, and boy, looking at this, I'm guessing that I'm going to have close to a gram, but I have to weigh and let it dry out before I weigh it. And so I'll be back now with a picture of the scale showing what it actually weighs. So here's that gold dried and on the scale, a little more than 7/10 of a gram, a little less than what I guessed in the pan, but still, it's considerably more than what we got from dry washing. Let's take a look at the dry wash gold. Here was what we got dry washing, 0.393, and just doing some rough back of an envelope kind of calculations, ballpark, I got about 35% of the total gold by dry washing and about 65% of the gold by wet washing through a sluice. So let's talk about what that means and talk about the previous test that I did on this, and we'll see what we conclude.
All right, so we've got our numbers. Let's talk about what our numbers really mean, because we're trying to determine sluicing versus dry washing, which is best. Really, it's the conditions that determine really what works and what doesn't. My best case, because I did a test just like this previously, the only difference was I didn't use that recirculating sluice. There was a live stream within 10 miles or so, and I just hauled it from the site I was dry washing to the creek and processed it there. But in that particular case, I got 97% recovery. Almost all the gold was recovered by dry washing. Let me show you a picture of that gold though, and you'll understand why it's so different.
So here's that gold, and you can see it's so much more coarse. The larger pieces, a lot of them here would be detectable with a metal detector. And in fact, that's how I found this spot. It was, we was detecting around, and I found a hot spot where there was big pieces and little that I was detecting. And I thought, oh, well, this would probably make a good dry wash spot. And indeed it did. I got, I don't know, I'll bet I got close to an ounce total. This isn't an ounce here, but I dry washed it other times. This was the test, but I did other times, and I'll bet I got close to an ounce out of dry washing that. So, it's a pretty good deal to dry wash it, and getting 97%, that's a number that I could be perfectly happy with. And the 3% that I recovered with the sluice was pretty much all real fine stuff.
But it's so different, the numbers 97% versus this case, which is really, that one was like a best case scenario. The one I just did that I showed you was more like a worst case scenario. Instead of getting like 97%, I got like 35% with the dry washer. That's pretty miserable. If I'm out in the hills and I've got a spot to dry wash and I'm getting 97%, I'm not going to look back. I'm going to say, great, 97%, keep running the dry washer because, I'm not worth worrying about all the extra work for that last 3%. But I did it for science, right? When I did it before, and I bucketed it up, hauled it, about 250 yards, and it's not 250 yards walking over a flat piece of ground. It's 250 yards walking over the side of a mountain, and took it to my car and put it in the back of the car, and then drove it to the live creek where I ran it, take the buckets out of the back of my truck and ran it in the creek. Like I say, 97%, but you've seen the gold. You've seen how much coarser it is and why that makes all the difference. So let me show you the kind of worst case scenario gold that we got. You've seen that. Let's take a look.
And this is the gold that I panned out this morning. You can see it's all fine. There's a few little chunky pieces in there, but there's nothing that would come close to even being noticeable on a metal detector, even, if it was right against the coil. It's just so much smaller, and that's why we got so much worse recovery with the dry washer.
And that pretty much explains when you have super fine gold, you want to be you really want to be looking at some sort of wet processing system. Now, at the case where I did this, I probably could haul my whole setup of the recirculating sluice and run, like I did in, my backyard here, run like 3 full 5-gallon buckets of material through. And, because it doesn't make any sense to dry wash it. If you're getting 35% recovery and you're dry washing, it doesn't really make sense, does it? So it's better for me to just bring all the water, bring the setup, and run it wet from the start, even though running it wet's a lot more work. And like I said in the video, it's a lot slower feeding it in. But still, for 35%, you're almost wasting your time dry washing. Now, I hope you've enjoyed the part where we've talked about, which is best dry wash, because there's certainly conditions where dry washing works great. There's certainly conditions where dry washing doesn't work hardly at all. And it makes a difference, the size of the gold and the amount of clay in the material. That's what determines it. And, if you don't have the experience to know what works and what doesn't, it could be a problem. And that's why I say in my videos, what you know as a prospector makes all the difference in the world. It really does. You can go out and make mistakes like getting 35% recovery, or you can know what you're doing and do a lot better. And so the reason that what makes such a difference is I want you to be a more successful prospector. I want you to go out and find some gold for yourself. And so I wrote a book to help impart my 40 years of experience plus college degree in mining engineering to you, so that you can be better and you can go out and find, like the book title says, a fistful of gold. So let me tell you a little bit more about my book right now.
So this is my book, Fistful of Gold. You can see it's an encyclopedia distilling down my 45 plus years of prospecting experience plus my degree into the parts that you need to know. I spent most of 10 years writing this. It was not just a simple effort that, I sat down and wrote it. You can see it's like 250,000 words. It's not something you're going to read through in a day or maybe even a week or more. But it's got a lot of information and reference material that you can come back to. You can read it once and read it again and get more out of it, because there's just that much depth of material in this. I wrote this book because I want you to have the skills to go out and find fistfuls of gold for yourself. And if you have the skills and know what you're doing and get out in the field and make a real effort, you can find significant gold. It's not easy. I'm not going to tell you that, because, gold, it wouldn't be, close to $2,000 an ounce, which is what it is right now. It wouldn't be so expensive if it was easy to find. It's not easy. You just can't walk out into an old gold field and start picking up nuggets. If the gold was easy to see and find, the old timers would have picked it up and taken it themselves. So you got to have skill. You got to know what you're doing. You got to be able to master what it takes to find gold, and you've got to have the persistence and put in the effort to find the material, to find the gold or diamonds or gemstones that you're looking for. Now, this book has geology, it has facts about gold, it has stuff about diamonds and platinum, but it's mostly about gold deposits, how gold deposits form, how placer and nuggets form, all the questions you probably wanted to ask. The book is available on Amazon, and I'll put a link to it in the description below, but you can look up on Amazon, Fistful of Gold, by Chris Ralph, and find this book. Now, the book, if you look on it, it has a very high rating. It has like a 4.7 or 4.8 out of 5, which is really high. I mean, it's hard to please everybody, but I'm close to a 5 out of 5, not far from it, right? So it's been out. I've sold more than 15,000 copies of this book, and I've had tremendous response, tremendous
positive response by the people who buy it. And I think if you buy it, you'll be just as happy with it. Now, in addition to my book, I also have a website that I do, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my website and show you some images from the website right now.
Now, my website is nevadaoutbackgems.com, and I'll put a link to the prospecting page, this prospecting encyclopedia page, down in the description below, but you can find it at Nevada Outback Gems. I sell some jewelry, turquoise, other gemstones there. I don't always keep the inventory perfectly up to date, so if you're interested in anything you see, do contact me first before trying to send me money or anything, because I want you to be able to get what you order. But the website has lots of different stories, old adventures, even some stories, true stories from the old-time miners of the 1800s. So I think it's something you'll find interesting.
The other thing I want to go back to is that all my comments, I want you guys to ask questions on the comments for my videos. I answer 100% of the comments that are made on my videos. Now, sometimes if somebody just says, hey, great video, I really enjoyed it, the comment may just be, well, I'm really glad you liked it. Or if it's a simple question. And sometimes I get people who ask me questions, I would take a book to answer that question. And I recommend that they just buy the book. But I answer all my questions. I try to help people as much as I can. I'm here to help you. So if you're interested in gaining the skills, if you're interested in knowing what you need to know to be successful, follow along with me. Subscribe to my channel, hit the bell so that they'll let you know when I come out with new videos, and I try to do that pretty much every Saturday morning. And you'll enjoy with me, you'll come along with me, we'll have an adventure together, and we will find some nice gold and see what it's really like getting out in the woods, or the deserts, or the mountains, wherever we land, wherever the gold is, wherever the diamonds are, wherever the platinum is. Come along, we'll have some fun. And I'll see you real soon on the next video.